Welcome to Evidence Mastery. I'm Dr. Masood Tusi. Today, we're diving into a really important document from the FDA, one that's set to change the future of drug development. We're talking about the new draft guidance on artificial intelligence, and believe me, if you work anywhere in this space, you've absolutely got to know what's inside. Okay, so the official title is Considerations for the Use of Artificial Intelligence to Support Regulatory Decision-Making for Drug and Biological Products. That's a mouthful, I know. But what does it actually mean? It means that for the very first time, the FDA has laid out a clear, comprehensive roadmap for how to use AI in regulatory submissions. This isn't just a suggestion, it's the new rulebook.
Now, before we go any further, just a quick but important disclaimer. What you're seeing here is our breakdown, our summary, and it's for educational purposes. We strongly encourage you to read the full, official guidance. That should always be your go-to source. And remember, while these are currently non-binding, they give us a crystal clear signal of where the FDA's head is at.
So here's our game plan for today. We'll start with the big picture, the guidance's main purpose. Then we'll get into the real heart of the document, the new 7-step credibility framework. After that, we'll look at how to define context and risk, how to build a solid assessment plan, and what it means to manage a model's life cycle. And we'll wrap up by looking at how the FDA actually wants you to work with them on this.
So what is this guidance all about? Well, at its core, it introduces a risk-based framework. The whole point is to create a structured, predictable way for companies to prove and for the FDA to evaluate that their AI models are credible when they're used to make big decisions about a drug's safety, its effectiveness, or its quality. And the entire framework really hinges on this one key concept: credibility. The FDA defines it as trust that's built up by collecting evidence. But here's the most important part. Credibility is always tied to a particular context of use. This is so critical. It means a model is never just approved in a vacuum. It's only credible for a very specific job.
Okay, so how do you actually build that credibility? Well, the FDA has given us the centerpiece of the whole guidance, a systematic 7-step process. You should think of this as your North Star for any AI implementation. It's the official playbook for building trust and backing it up with solid evidence.
And here are the 7 steps. You see, it all flows logically. You start by defining your question in the context. Then you figure out the risk. From there, you build a plan, you execute it, you document everything, and then finally you make the call on whether the model is good enough for its purpose. So let's start with those first 3 because they really are the foundation for everything that follows.
All right, let's dig into that foundation. Steps 1 through 3. These are absolutely crucial because the work you do here determines just how much rigor and how much evidence you're going to need for all the other steps. Getting these right from the start is just non-negotiable.
We've mentioned context of use, or COU, a few times, and this is where you have to be laser-focused. You have to spell out the model's exact role and its scope. Is it the main thing driving a decision, or is it just one piece of supporting information? You have to get this right because it directly feeds into the very next step, assessing the risk.
So once you've nailed down the COU, you can assess the model's risk. And the FDA's framework here is actually pretty simple and elegant. They say risk is just a function of 2 things. First, model influence. How much does the AI's output actually sway the final decision? And second, decision consequence. What happens if that decision turns out to be wrong?
Let's make this real with a couple of examples right from the guidance. For drug A, an AI model is the only thing being used to decide on patient monitoring for a life-threatening reaction. That's high influence and high consequence. So, boom, high risk. Now contrast that with drug B in manufacturing. The consequence of a mistake is still high. It impacts quality. But the model's influence is low because there's also a human checking the work. The result? A medium risk profile. See how that works?
Now, that risk assessment you just did, it leads us directly to step 4, the credibility assessment plan. Think of this as your blueprint, your detailed case for why your model can be trusted. And the guiding principle here is proportionality. The rigor and detail in your plan have to match the model's risk. High risk? You'd better believe you've got a high burden of proof. So what exactly goes into this plan? Well, the FDA lays out a few key areas. You need to describe the model itself, its architecture, and how it was developed. You have to detail the data you used, your training sets, your tuning sets, all of it. You need to explain the training process itself. And finally, you have to lay out exactly how you're going to evaluate the model's performance.
And that evaluation has to be robust. You can't just say, hey, the model works. You have to prove it with clear, quantifiable metrics. The guidance points to standard measures like sensitivity and specificity, showing how well your model finds the true positives and true negatives. You need to provide the hard numbers, and you've got to include things like confidence intervals.
The guidance also calls out some specific challenges you need to think about, and a big one is data drift. This is what happens when a model's performance gets worse over time because the new, real-world data it's seeing starts to look different from the data it was trained on. Your plan has to show that you've thought about this and have a way to handle it.
So the final steps in the framework, 5, 6, and 7, are all about executing your plan, documenting all your results, and making that final call on model adequacy. But, and this is a big but, the work doesn't stop there. This brings us to the ongoing job of lifecycle management.
Lifecycle maintenance is so important because AI models are not set-it-and-forget-it tools. Especially in a dynamic place like a manufacturing line, you need a plan to constantly monitor performance and manage any changes, whether you're making intentional updates or just seeing unintentional drift. It's all about making sure the model stays credible over time.
Now, one of the most practical takeaways from this entire guidance is this: the FDA really wants to talk to you. They say over and over again that you should engage with them early to discuss your plan, talk through challenges, and set expectations before you've invested a ton of time and resources.
And they've given us clear pathways to do it. This table just shows a few of the dedicated programs they have, from the C3TI program for clinical trials to specific groups for manufacturing, real-world evidence, and more. The message here is crystal clear. Don't go it alone. Reach out and use these resources. You know, this guidance is a huge step forward, but it also surfaces a bigger question for all of us in this field. As AI becomes just a standard part of our toolkit, how will we, as an industry, and the regulators collaborate to make sure we're using these incredible tools in a way that is both innovative and, above all, safe? That's really the challenge and the opportunity in front of us. Ultimately, what this new AI guidance really shows us is that the very principles of how we generate evidence are changing, and we all have to evolve right along with them. It's exactly this evolution that we explore here on Evidence Mastery, and it's also a central theme in my upcoming book. My book is called Real-World Evidence, Principles and Practice, and it will be available soon on Amazon.com. It really takes a much deeper dive into a lot of these concepts we've touched on today, and it's meant to be a practical guide for navigating this new world of evidence. Thank you so much for joining me for this breakdown of the FDA's new AI guidance. I really hope you found it valuable. To keep exploring these critical topics that are shaping the future of evidence and regulation, please be sure to subscribe to Evidence Mastery. We'll see you next time.